it is absolutely an MMA sport. So there's the grappling, there's, kicking, punching, all of that stuff. There's a lot that can happen under the water that doesn't get seen. So
Ashley Guapacha, formerly Ashley Hatcher, is a water polo player who's represented the Argentine national team in the last 7 years. She's competed at South American Championships, Pan American Games, and most recently the 2022 FINA World Championships in Budapest, Hungary. Before that, she also competed for Princeton University, where in 4 years she won 3 Eastern titles with the Tigers. Those were in 2012, 13, and 15. In 135 games, she scored 202 goals, had 67 assists, and made 85 steals. Now in this conversation, Ashley and I talk about all of her highlights throughout her water polo career, from the club level to the high school level to the collegiate level to the international level and even beyond that in masters. I'm privileged to know Ashley from the pool where we train together regularly. I'm always humbled and inspired by her ability to balance her water polo career, a large loving family, and a full-time professional career. I hope you guys enjoy the conversation and take something valuable from it. If you're encouraged to support the podcast, please have a look at the Patreon link in the description. And with that, my name is Alex Shozda. This is the Shozda Show. Let's begin.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, Alex was super excited too when I told him about it.
Yeah.
So he's going to listen to your episode. I'll send him the link.
Oh, nice.
So tournament coming up in Austin next weekend. You said Olympians are playing.
Usually that's the case. We'll find out when we get there. We don't really know until we show up. But
are you playing under Pegasus?
Yeah. I registered a women's team under Pegasus.
Where'd you find everybody?
Honestly, it's a collection of girls that, or women, I should say, that I played with and against in college. So former college rivals. We've kind of like formed a little group of ourselves that we just gel well together. We all, play really well together. They're still training and competing, which is, not always the case with women's water polo players after college. So we have kind of like a core group of like 4 or 5 of us. And then that's always like the base for our team. But, we all played at different college water polo schools.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Are you all local here in Texas?
No. Most of them are in Chicago, actually.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. And then from Dallas is just Katie Rigler. So she's coached for Pegasus a little bit. And she played at Princeton with me. So, yeah.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. So how'd you get started in water polo?
Family sport. So just kind of growing up, my mom, was looking for practicality in terms of where she can actually take all 5 of us at once instead of, she just couldn't physically drive us to 5 different sports practices at different locations. Mm-hmm. So I guess, my mom definitely did some open water swimming in Argentina growing up. And I think that's kind of how we found our way into swimming, also just from like a safety perspective. And then from there, I believe I have 4 older sisters.
I was going to ask, where do you fall within the 5?
I'm the baby of 5.
And then were you born in Argentina?
No, we were all born in Miami. Yeah. So the second oldest sister, her friend played water polo and then knew that we were just like a swimming family. So she kind of introduced her to it. She fell in love with the sport and it just trickled down from there and the rest of us played. So the oldest did not play. Second one started it because her friend introduced her and then it just kind of carried on.
That's awesome. So you get super competitive within the family?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
What's the age gap between all of you?
It ranges, I guess, like 12 years between me and the oldest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where's Karina fall on that?
She's the 4th out of 5.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But they're all 4 of them are from my mom's first marriage, and then I'm the baby from the second.
Gotcha.
So there's a big gap. Karina and I are like 6-7 years apart.
Yeah, so you wouldn't necessarily be playing on the same teams.
Yeah, we never got to play in the same team, but she is going to play next weekend. So getting her to kind of dust off the water polo muscle memory from college, and she's going to play with me next weekend. So that should be fun.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So Miami Country Day is that a high school or a club team that you're playing on? And is that where you kind of really got serious about it?
It was more of a formality. That's definitely, I think, I would say it's what held me back more than anything, actually.
How so?
Because we just didn't have a strong water polo program. It was quite literally me and my best friend from high school. Her name's Zoe, and also a fantastic water polo player. So it was just us two, and that was our team. I think a lot of people in Texas probably will, they can definitely empathize with that. You see a lot of that here with that growth of the sport. That's kind of how it starts,
Yeah,
right?
because I mean, water polo only became a high school sport in Texas for the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, and UIL for high schools was just within the last year that it finally kicked in. And so Florida is much more like, it's not like California where you have competitive water polo everywhere. It's just, there's just different pockets of it. And I had to really leverage club water polo to get better. And then Country Day was just, my mom taught there. It was a block or 3 blocks from my house. And it was a great school. So that's why, that's where I ended up for school. But the water polo program was actually super weak. So I had to outsource and supplement with club water polo for sure.
Right. So then what did your training schedule look like if you're balancing 2 different teams?
I think the hardest part, definitely the hardest part was commuting, especially before I was able to drive, But I'd say like it definitely was, morning swim practice at 5 a.m. before high school with, the same group of people that we basically swim with now. So you had kind of like that master's group of people that were, before work swimming, and a few of us high schoolers would join them. And then after school would be, depending on whether you're in season or not, high school practice. And then depending on the day of the week, try to make it, 7 to 9 p.m. Or a little bit later to water polo practice. So that was either, there were pretty much 3 clubs that I rotated between. 2 of them were in South Miami, which was pretty far with traffic and stuff in Miami being bad. So, that was at least, a 30-minute drive. So those were harder to make it to during like the school year and during the week. So I'd say like generally that was more of like a weekend thing unless it was summer. And then there was also like a club team of men, like a men's masters club team that had a lot of really good water polo players. And over the years kind of developed a relationship between, the coach and that community and my family, where that coach would start to, maybe with some resistance, let us join his practices. He was not always, that fond of having women join his practice because I think he had, some opinions about it, about whether we'd be able to compete or not. But thankfully, kind of over the years, like my sisters got opportunities and a few other women got opportunities to practice with that group, which was a lot closer to where I lived. And so that was, I think, really important too, to be able to get those opportunities to play with people that are just, stronger and better than you.
Yeah, that all sounds like a huge amount of work and a massive commitment, especially for a high school player. Mm-hmm. So what period of playing water polo did you decide that, that's what you want to do and you want to go all out in it?
It's a good question because I was definitely a swimmer first.
That's news to me.
Yeah. A lot of water polo players were water polo players first. I was a swimmer first, and I was good enough in freshman year of high school, sophomore year of high school to make states at Florida, which was, pretty competitive. Was trying to evaluate commitment level between the two. I didn't start water polo until 8th grade, which is pretty late by today's standards, I would say. A lot of my college teammates had been playing since they were 8 or 9 years old. I started, 5 years after them, but I had the base of swimming. So I think that there was still, I started water polo in 8th grade. 9th grade was, just kind of like the fast swimmer who had enough athleticism that seemed to be translating to water polo. 10th grade started to get the hang of it a little bit more. So I'd say between, sophomore and junior year of high school was where I started to make that switch of okay, I'm going to just focus on this, and go the water polo route.
Yeah. When did you start feeling like you were getting really good at it too?
Probably junior year of high school, I feel like. But it's interesting because I feel like, again, my journey was much later on the water polo side compared to a lot of my teammates in college. And so I feel like a lot of my development happened in college, actually, whereas a lot of people enter college and, honestly, I saw players that peaked in high school. You have that where you peak really early and then you kind of plateau. I felt like I was always playing catch up. And so while that was a little bit of a disadvantage for me going into college, I think that it ended up working in my favor because, it motivated me in college to work, to get better. And I feel like, from freshman to senior year of college was really where a lot of my growth happened.
Yeah. How'd you find your way over to Princeton? I know your older sister, Karina, also played water polo there.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that has a little bit to do with it.
Yeah. It had a lot to do with it for sure. We were all really excited when she went to Princeton, and it became a huge part of, our family because the school just has like a really great community. The water polo program was great because it had that, you have obviously the academic side where you're not really compromising your academics to go to practice or anything like that, but they were still a very competitive program. And that's pretty much what I was looking for. So if you're looking to play, Division I college water polo, your options are really California or a hodgepodge of like the Midwest and the Northeast. It's just kind of very random schools. There's like schools that have it, schools that don't.
And it seems like a lot of the universities too just have it as a club or an intramural sport as well.
Exactly. So it's just kind of random. Yeah, it's super random. And so I was pretty much between Princeton and University of Michigan. I wasn't looking to go as far as California necessarily. That was going to be kind of expensive and just far from family growing up in Miami. And also, I don't know that I would have gotten as competitive of an offer from a California school, again, because I felt like I was playing catch up a little bit skill-wise. And so it was really between Princeton and University of Michigan for me. And I was just, hopeful that I could also get into Princeton. So yeah, the coach she kind of teed it up for me by going there. And then I had to just, hold up my end of the bargain grade-wise, and then go to, I think it was like, like a camp or something just to, play a little bit in front of the coach and whatnot.
Yeah, a little demo. What does the whole recruiting process out there look like?
For us, it was a lot. It has a lot to do with club water polo. So again, it always comes back to club, and it's really important. So, the Junior Olympics is the biggest club tournament for kids in the U.S. So every summer with those clubs that I trained with, which is again, probably where a lot of my development happened, was over those summers, we would go on California training trips for 3 weeks at a time, play in a couple tournaments out there, and wrap up with that Junior Olympics tournament. And sometimes we just took like a, best of Florida team and we did really well against the California teams. So a lot of the recruiting is centered around that event. You have to go and you have to be seen. And again, the better team you're playing on, the more likely chance that you're going to be seen. So a lot of it centered around that. And obviously just connections that like any club coaches that you have can make. So, one of the coaches that we played for in Florida was pretty well connected. And I think he was the one who started to facilitate that, relationship with Princeton for Karina, which then, I got to step into as well. But it's it has a lot to do with that club tournament, coaches connections, getting you, that chance to be looked at. And then I think now it's different, it's definitely since I was in college, it's definitely just gotten younger and younger. So kids, I think, are expected to go to like junior days and stuff. I know when I was at Princeton, we were hosting junior days with high school juniors that were already making commitments to play at Princeton, which is crazy to me because it's pretty early still. And I was like thinking back and I was like, wow, I was still developing a lot at that time. And I think a lot of times now it's like, they're looking to do more digital stuff, more video, online profiles and whatnot, which was not as popular, I'd say, or wasn't really a big thing for when I was going through that process. But yeah, I pretty much just did 3 recruiting visits. So I did Princeton, University of Michigan, and Maryland. So those were kind of the 3 recruiting trips that I went on, all in the fall of my senior year of high school.
Yeah. So before we dive into everything about playing water polo at Princeton, I'm just going to take a wild guess and say that a lot of people listening aren't super familiar with water polo. Mm-hmm. So how would you explain the sport to somebody who's maybe played it but never at a high level?
I think, the simplest way is people draw comparisons between, say, like basketball with the physicality of hockey, but in the water. But I say basketball because you have like that similar formation, and you've got, a center, you've got, somebody who plays the point, you've got the ability to kind of drive and post up and run picks or screens. So all of those elements from basketball would apply. However, in my opinion, and this is my opinion that's formulated very much more in the last few years after playing more international level water polo, it is absolutely an MMA sport. So there's the grappling, there's, kicking, punching, all of that stuff. There's a lot that can happen under the water that doesn't get seen. So that's why I'll also kind of throw hockey in there as like the physicality aspect of it that you don't really get in basketball so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you prepare yourself for all that? It's such a physically demanding sport, and it sounds like it's also a big mental game too, because you have all the strategy, the plays, but then on top of that, you're in a whole different element. You're in the water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's just there's a lot that you can do. I mean, swimming is always going to be your base, but it's just such a small part of it. I mean, it's very helpful to have that endurance, so that you're going up and down, you're getting less tired when you have those battles, those moments of physicality. But I think that just like the grappling, wrestling with teammates and all of that, the holding, the grabbing, those are things that you need to work on in practice. And obviously, if you're in college, you're playing a bunch of games, you're scrimmaging so much, so frequently that you're getting those reps in. I'd say that that's probably something I struggle the most with to recreate in my current routine, training routine, because it's just, you realize how tiring it is. You're like, wow, I'm in great swim shape, but that extra like 20 seconds every possession of somebody holding you down or, grabbing you while you're trying to move is just, it's very tiring. So
yeah, or you have a breakaway for the ball or something, and then time's super important, so you have to go 110%.
Yes.
I could definitely relate. I don't know if I've ever told you, but I played water polo freshman year of high school.
Yeah.
I just came into it from a long career of swimming, and just I don't think I've ever played a ball sport before that.
Mm-hmm.
So every single element of it outside of swimming was just completely new to me, and I was terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, I was so bad for probably the first.
You were able to get up and down the pool quickly, but then.
Yeah, that was about it. They put me on at the beginning of the match. You do the swim off for the ball, so that was all I was good at first. But then towards the end of the season, I was decent. I moved up from the freshman team to I think JV.
Nice.
Played at regionals and sectionals, but I never got in good enough shape to manage all of the swimming back and forth. But like you said, all the grappling underwater and doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a whole different element to it that it can vary depending on what kind of atmosphere you're playing in. Are you playing high school water polo? Are you playing high school water polo in California? Are you playing it in Texas? Are you playing masters water polo? Are you playing in a men's tournament or a women's tournament? Are you playing college water polo? Are you playing outside of college? And I say that because college water polo was definitely physical in the U.S., but that's just, again, what I've found playing the last few years playing against other countries is just the level of physicality is just what really has given me that opinion. I was like, wow, this really is an MMA sport with like the amount of holding and grabbing and grappling that happens.
Yeah, is that the biggest difference that you see in between like a United States and international scale of the sport?
Yeah, I think so. When we're thinking of just like U.S. in terms of the college division, you have physicality, but once you go outside of the U.S., it's just, it's a lot more physical. There's a lot more holding, especially on the women's side. I always say that, women's water polo is very different than men's water polo. And it's because you wear a full suit. So there's just a lot more material that you're able to grab. You can hold on to very easily without it getting noticed. And so women do that quite a bit, whereas men are just, they're wearing Speedos, so there's not as much that can be grabbed. They still grab the suit, but there's a lot less that, you can grab. So there's a lot more holding in the women's game. Right.
What's the dynamic of playing co-ed, especially in training and in competition?
It's interesting. I think that I enjoy a position where I'm respected by the guys that I play with. I'm confident that a lot of women don't feel that way because, it can just be intimidating to step into a men's water polo practice and, they will see a woman in the pool and they'll be like, okay, we're not going to pass her the ball. We'll just pass it to everybody else. So it's always a fact or like a matter of proving yourself and showing that you have the ability to play at the same level.
Yeah, how do you do that when you walk into a new group? Is it like the iconic movie scene where somebody goes into jail and they pick up the biggest guy and start a fight with him?
Sometimes. Yeah, you kind of just have to do what you have to do. You just play your game and just show them. I think it doesn't take that long for people to realize, like,
eventually they see that you can hold your own.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and you should be able to demonstrate that within a practice, right? If you're scrimmaging against a bunch of guys, it's pretty clear. It's like, you might be stronger than me, but I also, played at a level where I understand the game as well as you, or maybe I understand it better than you, and you're just stronger than me. So I think, it's just a kind of a matter of getting in and going for it and just kind of showing them, and then you earn their respect pretty quickly.
Yeah, would you say that when you were training on the club teams and in high school, is that something that you did a lot more of that helped you develop as a player as opposed to other people going into the college scene?
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of my teammates in college, they had ex-Olympians coaching them, and, they just had a really competitive landscape growing up in California. And that was something that we didn't have. We had, again, like pockets of strong, water polo presence in Florida, but not anything compared to what it is in California. Right, so
you had to get a lot more creative with how you made your competition.
Exactly. You had to always look for those opportunities and a lot of that was just playing up. So in California, it's much more structured. You're not going to be 14 playing 18U. Mm-hmm. In Florida, if you're decent, you're 14, you're playing 18U. Mm-hmm. So it's either playing up in age on the women's side or finding opportunities to play against boys and men, which is a lot of what we recreate here, I think, in Texas, because you have to until you get to that point where, water polo is so strong and the presence is so large that the competition level is high across the board. You have to find those opportunities and, like you said, get creative to supplement how you're, training.
Yeah, so let's hop back over to Princeton.
Mm-hmm.
So what was your freshman year like? You said that you did a lot of your development while you were there. So did you kind of come in as a small fish in a big pond?
I feel like I was able to make an impact for sure my freshman year, but not as much as like the other freshmen in my class, I would say. Mm-hmm. I feel like I came in definitely with the poorest fundamentals for sure in terms of just like technical skill. Again, because I felt like I was still just making that transition from, swimmer turned into water polo player through high school and had only been playing, 5 years at that point by the time I was a college freshman. So I think that I was able to definitely make an impact freshman year, but my understanding of the game and my role in the game is what really grew over the next few years. And so even just kind of like, small skills that were rusty when I first got in, those were the types of things that I worked on. And I had one of our assistant coaches, so he was Serbian, his name's Momo, and he would just kind of work with me in the off season because that's kind of a big difference between Princeton and other schools on the West Coast. So they're training, they're training a lot in the off season. Our full-time training didn't really start until January. Like we were swimming and lifting in the off season, but the focus was on our studies. So I had time, or I had, free time, I would say. And so I would kind of work sometimes one-on-one with one of our assistant coaches just to make up for what I felt was like a gap in experience and just like amount of time that I've played. But yeah, that's kind of a big difference between, so we always started our season a little bit rustier. And then by, we kind of hit our stride a few months in because, these other teams are coming in having trained probably twice what we did.
Right. So you got to play catch up really quick. It's crunch time.
Yeah.
What's the team element like at Princeton? So you're going from playing with multiple different clubs, high school teams, masters teams, and then finally it's kind of like you found a group of girls that you're going to be with for the next 4 years. So what kind of element did that camaraderie have?
It was amazing, honestly, because I can say that because, I've talked to former college competitors and high school teammates who played at other, college water polo programs. And at the end of the day, when you're getting a big group of women together from a bunch of different backgrounds, it can go really well or it can just not go that well. And then you just have segmentation between your team, and you have different pockets of people that are friends with each other. And, you can still all commit. You're an athlete. You can commit to the, communal goal and work together. what we had was definitely very special. So to this day, a lot of my teammates from college are still my best friends. And I like to drag them out of retirement every once in a while, drag them to a Masters water polo tournament. So we played when Pegasus hosted a tournament in the fall here. We were doing, like I mentioned, Katie, she's a Pegasus coach. She was hosting a Friendsgiving, and we made it so that Friendsgiving was actually the same weekend as the Masters tournament. Pulled a few of them out of retirement, and I think it was like 5 or 6 of us that played at Princeton together, all played that weekend, and that chemistry is just still there. It's something that you never really lose, and then you play in a different environment and you miss those teammates because they knew you so well, or they still know you that well. So I think I was very lucky. We had a very, very special group, and it was very tight-knit and still, my best friends to this day.
Yeah, do you have any specific games or just team moments, things that you did together that really stick with you? So I remember like at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, before every single swim season started, we just do something big as a team. Like a lot of times we went out camping in the woods, and it would just be, miserable conditions.
Yeah.
And like fall of Wisconsin, it's raining, it's cold, people don't know how to put their tents up properly. So I just remember there was like 8 of us huddled in one tent for 2 people because everybody else's tent broke and the cold rain was coming in and dripping on their foreheads during the middle of the night. It's just this rough experience, but at the end of the trip, you all have something to talk about and something to remember.
Yeah.
Or playing paintball was another big one. Just a bunch of guys shooting each other with guns. Do you do anything with the girls over there?
Honestly, not really outside of season. I think that, we did like some team bonding stuff that, again, was more convenient for everybody who lived in California. So most of it was, I'd say, in season. And a lot of it just kind of comes back to, I think, like championship games and whatnot. So for us, it was called Eastern Championships, and you had to win that to earn a chance to play at the NCAA tournament at the end of each season, which we did it 3 out of the 4 years that I was there. So we did it my freshman year, sophomore year, and senior year. So definitely one of the most memorable moments is junior year when we lost, because I can picture that very well. It was at Bucknell University. We just did not play well that day. And of course it's one game, one chance, and you have a game that you don't play well, and that's kind of what you remember. But of course you have like the highs too. So the games that we did win, the championships we played great, we did win. And, I think some of the best memories are playing against, some of these powerhouse teams that, again, have a bunch of the current Olympians, or people that are part of that pipeline in their program. They're training twice as much as we are. And we went in and, played competitive games with them. So I think we kind of took some of them by surprise sometimes. Because they weren't expecting that from an East Coast school. But yeah, those are some of the, memories that come to mind.
I'm going to dig in a little bit on loss since you mentioned it. Clearly it's a super competitive sport and only one team can come out winning. So how do you deal with loss in your career?
Well, I think that at this point, it's really you're focusing on the games that need to be won. And then there's going to be plenty of games that, you might lose depending on the tournament. So right now, for me, it's a lot about, at least when it comes to Argentina, it's a lot about strategy in terms of like, what are the games we need to win? And then there's going to be games that we can't be as competitive in. There are going to be games that we can win, but it's not as big of a deal if we lose them because we're not expected to win them. And then there's the games that have to be won. So I think it's a lot about,
all coming in with a game plan and just knowing where you need to perform.
Yeah. And then tournament dependent. So, we got a chance to qualify for Worlds last year, which was completely unexpected. Mm-hmm. Nobody thought we would ever qualify. We made it there and we were like, we're just here to have a good time and see how well we can do.
Wasn't it the first time that Argentina's women's team ever made an appearance?
Yes. Yeah, it was the first time ever. The men had been before, I want to say twice, and that was the first time for us. So, again, the tournament prior was the World League tournament, FINA World League, and that was in Peru, which was, I think, like March or around March of last year. And we knew going into that tournament that if we beat Cuba, we would win that bid and that place to play at the World Championship, which 5 years before, we definitely wouldn't have been competitive in that game. We might have held in for a quarter or two and then just come out, 4 or 5 goals down. And we actually won that game. It came down to we were up by a goal, and then at the very end there was like a turnover, and somebody from the Cuban team got a chance to shoot, and it went in, but it was after the buzzer. And they do like a VAR review now. And so the referees met and deliberated for about 5 minutes, which probably felt like 35 minutes, and reviewed the video, reviewed the shot clock like 10 or 20 times to confirm that it was not a goal. And that was the game that did it. And that was how we qualified last year. So
It's got to be huge. What was the celebration like afterwards?
oh, it was insane. We couldn't even believe it. Because just going in again, like we're like, okay, this is the game to give it our all. This is the game that we have to win, to earn that chance to qualify. And then it happened.
So how'd you get that group of girls together?
It started, it's actually a funny story because my mother's Argentinian, so I was born in Miami. I was studying abroad in Brazil in 2012, just for like a 6-week, program because I was studying Portuguese in college, and then naturally found my way to water polo club because I thought it'd be cool to train with the team there, and the coach let me practice there, and I met another girl who is now a longtime friend of mine, and she's my team captain for the Argentinian team. And we kind of just started talking because we were at the same practice on the same day. And I think she was just visiting for vacation or something, and had a friend who played there. And we got talking, and she realized that my mother was Argentinian. And so she's like, oh, your mom's Argentinian. You should get citizenship and start playing with us. And we're within like 2 years age range of each other. So we were at a similar point in our lives, like water polo wise. So that kind of stuck with me. I don't know why I didn't do it a little bit sooner. I guess it was just, an intimidating process to start. Even though it ended up being pretty easy, it's a matter of getting in touch with the coaches and they don't really know you. You're just this person that someone's going off of word of mouth from meeting, at a practice in Brazil.
I'm sure being in college too, and you're a little bit younger, all of that seems a little out of the box.
Yeah. And had plenty going on with just being in college and whatnot. I do wish I had done it a little earlier because there was a South American championship that was actually held in Argentina, in Mar del Plata, which is where a lot of my family's from. So that would have been cool. I think I missed that by a year. But yeah, by 2015, I finally got the expedited passport and whatnot, all the paperwork done. I remember going to the embassy in, I think, New York because I was still in college in New Jersey at the time. Mm-hmm. And then we went to the Pan American Games in 2015 in Toronto. So that was my first tournament with them. I went to Argentina beforehand, and we trained for 2 weeks over the summer together, just trying to get to know each other. Mm-hmm. And then went to Toronto and played together in Pan American. So that's kind of where it all started. But the group then has nothing to do with the group that it is today. It's very different.
All right, so how did it grow?
Honestly, just through experience. And one of my coaches, I still talk to him today. He's still coaching, but doing some water polo outside of Argentina as well, traveling around the world and whatnot. And he kind of goes in with this perspective of taking a team. He says that there's 4 different levels to a water polo team when it comes to an international team in terms of development. So level 1 would be the U.S. women's team, for example. They're just extremely dominant. They've been playing together for years. Their execution is flawless. Level 4 would be some of these teams in maybe South America, Africa, Asia that are still just kind of getting their feet wet. And that's kind of where we were. We were in level 4, I would say, in 2015. And so he always says that it takes at least 7 years to really have an impact on a program and just develop a new pipeline of athletes and get from let's say level 4 to level 3. And so I thought that was interesting, and it's definitely been very accurate. So, for me, I've just kind of played this tangential role being the outsider. It's hard to have an impact when you're not there training with the team, A lot of the girls will also play in Europe, but then they come back to Argentina and they train together they've grown up together. They've played on the same clubs together. Whereas I'm just, one of the Americans coming in. So I'd say like in 2015, it was very like I kind of played. I was like, that was a really cool experience, but the water polo level wasn't incredible. I didn't feel like we gelled well together as a team. And we won an important game at Pan Americans, but it just wasn't, good water polo. So I think I don't think I played with them for a year and a half or a couple of years. And then a new coach came in, and he was the one who, again, was talking about like that long-term vision of developing the team and kind of pitched that to me and said, hey, I know that you played with us before. Would you be interested in continuing to play with us? And I was like, well, like, I liked his vision. I thought it was really interesting. And that's kind of where we like did a reset, if you will. And it's just hard because, again, it's women that are, still living their personal and professional lives. And then a subset of their life is playing water polo at that level, which, again, is always going to restrict you from getting to, maybe level 1 where everybody's playing full time and that's their job, which is fine. But what I mean by that is you just have a lot of turnover. So you're kind of constantly filtering through female athletes that are like, oh, okay, I'm kind of ready to move on.
Right, so it's difficult to build that base chemistry.
Yes,
to
when
get
you're
to
not
that first
all just
level.
exactly when you're not all just all in like, hey, we're playing. This is our job. It's very hard to build that team, and a big part of these teams that are very good with any sport is years playing together, right? So that was always like our issue. Is like there were a few of us that were consistent. One of them being my teammate and captain Carla, and she's the one I met in Brazil. And we laughed because it was me, her, and like, another girl, Dana, who played in Spain. And it was just us since, 2015 up until last year. We were like the only 3 that were still there from that original team. But within the last few years, it's kind of just like every tournament, we've had like another opportunity. It's a little bit of the chicken and the egg because you kind of, when it comes to an international federation and government money funding your program, you have to show something. You have to show results to be able to earn more privileges and opportunities to play. But at the same time, you need an investment to be able to yield results a lot of times. So it's kind of like that was always the challenge, was like taking that first gap of like proving ourselves before they respected us enough to make the investment. And I think that's what we were able to accomplish within the last like year and a half.
Yeah, it sounds like it's been working out really well for you girls.
Yeah,
Since
we've
last
come a
year
long
in
way.
Budapest, you had the 2022 World Championships, and you guys placed 14th,
Yeah.
right, out of 16, having never appeared before.
Yep.
So what's that whole experience like?
It was awesome. It was really, really cool. I never thought that, we never thought we would be able to play at Worlds, honestly. Like the Pan American Games, there's just a little bit easier line of sight to qualifying. It's not necessarily easy, but much more achievable. Whereas qualifying for Worlds, like I mentioned, was just a little bit more out of reach for where we were. But it was honestly so cool. It was just, you get to go and play in pretty much the most competitive water polo tournament in the world because, and I would argue more so than the Olympics in some respects because, the way that the tournament's structured on the Olympic side is, you're pulling teams from across the world trying to get more representation from different continents and such. And then the way it's structured at World Championships is a little bit different with the way you qualify. So I'd say at least equally, if not more competitive, right? And it was just really cool to be able to see that much high-level water polo. I think it was even more special that it was in Budapest because it took place at one of, I would say, the most iconic water polo pools in the world, where you have a stadium or like a tribune or stands with thousands of people there. And we actually got to play Hungary, which was very humbling. But we were so excited about it, even though we knew that we were going to get destroyed, because this is the opportunity to play against one of the best teams in the world at their home pool, where water polo is the most revered sport in the country. I would argue is really special. So there were just like thousands of people there, and you're like, wow, I've never seen thousands of people at a water polo game before.
Right. Is that one of your best memories of that tournament?
Oh yeah, by far. Just like playing in that pool was just super it was amazing. It was amazing.
Yeah, I remember all of us back here were watching you guys online on live streams, trying to figure out what was going on.
Yeah.
So when you came back after that tournament and you girls accomplished 12th place, what was it like hearing from your family, from your friends, everybody who saw you on television, online?
Yeah, they were just super excited because it's not just that we went there. It was like we went there and we won a game. We didn't just go there and place last. We also went there and placed higher than Brazil, which is one of our biggest rivals and a team that, again, every year we've been kind of inching closer and closer. And we're looking to make that next gap where we beat them instead of they beat us. And we placed higher than them at the tournament. And we beat South Africa. And that's a team that's been to the Olympics before, so they've got the Olympic experience. They've got a lot more training and time played together under their belt. And we came back knowing that we could have won another game, quite frankly. I don't think that our training was up to the point that these other teams had it. I know that personally I was probably at like 65%, which was why going in I was very anxious because I don't like going in and competing when I know that I'm not at 100% of where I want to be. But again, we didn't expect to qualify, and that was just the reality of where my training was at that point. And you can only do so much in, a couple months. So did what I could to get prepared. But it was kind of cool to come back and know that we're making those advancements. Like even playing teams like the U.S. and Hungary and whatnot, it was 5 years ago, we would just get scored on the whole game. And then the difference is you watch an offensive possession and we're just stuck. We can't get past half court. Now the difference is we play those top, teams in the world, top 3 teams in the world, which we played all top 3 teams. And we'll still lose by a decent amount, but we are able to do damage. And that was kind of like the key from my coach is we know the outcome of what these games are going to be because of the level of these teams. But there's a difference between playing the game and not playing the game. And now we can play. We can control defensive possessions. Again, their outcome's going to be the same, but we can score against these teams. We can do damage. We can draw exclusions and actually play the game and be in that first 6 meters of offense versus just getting pressed out to half court and then you're not even playing at that point.
Yeah, would you say that there's any handful of things that you saw playing against those teams, technical wise or just how they do things that really were a light switch for yourself and the girls' team? I think
just the velocity of the passing was the biggest thing. Okay. Just the speed with which they move the ball and the accuracy of their passing is probably one of the biggest differentiators. Because, again, going back to the whole swimming thing, I was able to counter back and forth with some of those girls, and I was pretty pleased with myself. I could keep up just fine with, honestly, the fastest of all of them. But then it's just the velocity with which they're able to move the ball and execute those decisions is, that's just experience playing at that level. But I remember just being on defense and being wow, I've got to pay a lot more attention than I normally do because the ball's moving a lot faster than I'm used to.
Yeah, so what do you think is next for yourself and the Argentinian team?
Next in line is...
Because there's the World Championship Games in Japan, right?
There are in July. That one, for us, we feel like that's going to be hard to qualify for. Again, it always kind of comes down to tournament specifics. Anything is possible. However, Canada is another pretty dominant women's team that it's not really feasible for us to beat them at this point, I will say. They lost a game in the fall that basically the outcome of that loss is they need the next tournament to qualify for Worlds, which what that means is they take a spot. And we're on the same side of the world as them. They take a spot. That's one less spot for us. So while it's possible, it's just not as likely. However, anything is possible. And then beyond that, one of the biggest focuses is the Pan American Games in October. So that's going to be in Chile. We've already qualified for that. That's going to be at the end of October. And our goal for that would be to medal at Pan American Games because U.S. will be there, Canada will be there. Again, just being realistic, those teams are out of reach. We're not going to beat those teams this year. But then beyond that, it becomes a pretty competitive landscape. You have, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Mexico, Brazil, and us. And then fighting with 4 or 5 other teams that are at a very similar level for a medal, and to be on a medal stage with those teams would be pretty cool. So that's kind of what we're after.
And both of those tournaments in Japan, the World Cup and World Championships and the Pan Am Games in Chile will be leading up to 2024 Olympics. So is that on the sites for the team?
I would say no. Not as I understand it anyway. However, I'd say 2028 Olympics would be technically feasible because, again, it all comes down to logistically, like how they organize it, how many teams qualify per continent and all that. Are they going to expand the program more, right, and include more spots? The big thing is that, and again, we share those spots for qualifying with teams like US and Canada that are so dominant. That's why it's pretty hard. However, because those Olympics are in the US, they don't take a spot. So they're a host country. So that opens up a spot besides Canada. So like Canada women's team takes one spot and the US is hosting and they don't take a spot. As I understand it, it opens up another slot for another team to get in there. I do not intend to be playing water polo.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, it's 5 years down the road. Do you plan to keep going on?
I don't. My teammate loves to, one of my teammates is playing in Spain right now. She played professionally in Spain before, just started playing with me on Argentina, got her citizenship, is now playing in Spain again, and she's very adamant on trying to get me to play until then because she sees it as a possibility, and it definitely is. I am more so of the opinion that I will be glad that I contributed to the process and the development of the team and see all my 16, 17-year-old stud teammates that I play with now just playing at the height of their career in that environment. But you never know.
Yeah, but kind of going on the retirement theme of things, you're 29 now. Hope you don't mind me sharing that with the whole world.
Yeah.
But you have a full-time job. Yeah. You have a husband. You live very close to family, which I know that you're very tight with. You spend a lot of time together. So how do you balance all of that with still competing on an international level? Yeah,
I think that, in the years prior, the tournaments were a little bit more spread out, again, because of what I explained about having to prove ourselves before we got the respect and investment from the government, right? And so we didn't have as many tournaments. It was like maybe one a year. And if we didn't get first at South Americans or second, that's it. Like we failed. We got third. We lost by 1 goal. That's it. Like we're not going to get funding to go to the next tournament. However, within the last year, just things kind of fell in order finally, and they fell in place for us. And so it was March in Peru. We qualified for Worlds, which was in Hungary for 2 weeks in June and July. And then we had the South American Games at the end of the year in Paraguay in October. So I'd say water polo definitely took over my personal life last year, especially. Prior to that, it was very manageable for the reasons I mentioned. It was just, less tournaments. It was more spread out. Last year, I was like, wow, that was a lot. And I feel like I dedicated, most of my time off outside of work was dedicated to water polo. And I'm also lucky that I have a great company that I work for. They're super supportive. They think it's awesome. And I have the flexibility that I can technically work from another country. Especially because I don't handle any customer data and I'm in a sales role now. So I don't have that logistical concern of like data privacy laws and whatnot because I'm not handling customer data. So all that to say that I've also just like worked sometimes on these trips when you're like go up early and like, you're just training a little bit in the beginning and you have a lot of downtime to make it less disruptive to my professional life. However, I don't think that's like super sustainable long term. So,
is there anything that you do to take a break? Just kind of unwind, let loose when everything's getting super tight? I'm
doing that right now. So we actually have a tournament. There's a tournament with the national team in April that I am not going to. And I guess it's the Copa is what it's called. And that's going to be in Brazil. And that was mostly because just, again, last year was just like an uphill battle, getting my shoulder in the right place from an injury perspective. And I felt like I just didn't anticipate so many tournaments. And so it kind of all happened, and it was like, oh, there's another tournament in 4 months. I have to get ready. And I was just kind of stuck in that cycle without giving my body time to just kind of like relax and truly develop a training plan the way that you should, starting from, you know, a little bit more basic and building your way up and listening to your body as you go. So last year was a lot of just like survival and doing, you know, just like getting in the best shape that I could while battling through pain and injury. I think that my physical therapist that I found in Dallas was a huge part of my success. So, you know, one of the very wonderful, accomplished swimmers we swim with, Ryan Berube, introduced me to his physical therapist. I saw him like holding his back at practice, and I was like, oh, you have back problems too. And we started talking, and he recommended his physical therapist. And I was like, oh, well, you know, you're an Olympic medalist. I'm sure that I can trust your opinion in terms of PTs. And he's truly been wonderful because he treated me like an athletic trainer. And that's what he told me from the beginning. So that was a big difference for me last year. But now I've kind of like finally found the time to, or this is the time that I think I need to take a few months to myself. I moved into a new role at my company, which is going to require me to travel a little bit more the next few months. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't feel comfortable falling back into that cycle of like, it's like when I'm here training and overtraining to like compensate for the time that I'm not here, which just results in my shoulder hurting and whatnot.
It's kind of like biting off more than you can chew.
Exactly.
And then you have to learn to chew faster, and sometimes it causes some problems.
Exactly. And then it's like I'm overtraining and overdoing it, and then I'm off because I'm traveling for work. So knowing that I was making that transition for work and just personally, I thought that I would benefit from kind of reclaiming a little bit of my personal time. Mm-hmm. I told my coach from the beginning, or since like November, I told him that I won't be able to play that first tournament in April. Mm-hmm. He was not thrilled about it, but he understood, and our priority again is October. So he was like, as long as you come in October and it's the best I've ever seen you, then we're good. So that is the plan at the moment. And that's kind of just my way to, I think, keep myself motivated, because it's like, if you just overdo it, I don't want to resent water polo for taking over my life. And last year it really occupied most of my time outside of work.
It sounds like a great approach to it too, mm-hmm. especially once you have that foundation and you have the skill set, then you really can afford to focus on the quality of your playing versus the quantity. Yeah, exactly. And for me, it's like, if I committed to that tournament in April, I know that these few months of my life would be very not enjoyable, because I would just have all this stress and anxiety about not training properly and not training enough. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be able to like step into a new role at work and really commit myself to it and enjoy it, and enjoy like travel opportunities with my work. I'm in a sales role, like getting in front of new people, building relationships. I didn't want to feel like I had to pull back on that because of my training, which is what would have happened. Mm-hmm. And I also, again, while my coach, I'm sure, would say that he would be fine accepting me at like 40%, 50%, whatever it is. That's just not what I wanted to do. And I felt like it's hard though, because I do have like guilt about not going. But I even talked to like my captain, my teammates, and they're like, no, it makes sense. And I totally understand. If it's worth anything, I definitely agree with you there. Yeah. And it sounds like you've had a huge career with it too. So kind of something I'm super curious about is, in the entire time that you've been playing water polo, how have you seen the sport change? I know earlier you were talking a little bit about how kind of the recruiting process and mm-hmm. adding film to show your gameplay at ages, 12, 13 is now becoming really popular. So that's one thing. What else have you seen change in the sport? I would say that, they're always looking for opportunities to make the sport more appealing, because it's not as popular in the US as it is in Europe. A lot of that comes down to, there's a lot of whistles, there's a lot of fouls, people don't really understand what's going on. And like other sports, it's like, how can we monetize it? How can we make it more marketable? And it's always about more activity, more goals, more scoring. So that's kind of been the focus of like the rule changes. There's been honestly a lot of rule changes the last few years, where they're just always looking for those opportunities to make it a higher scoring game, shorter shot clock, like quicker decision making,
and speeding up the game in general, so that again it just becomes more appealing to to an audience. So that's probably the biggest change, I think. And a lot of those changes have started to manifest over the last few years.
What's the culture like of water polo?
Oh, that's a tough one.
I guess it also probably changes quite a bit whether you're playing in Eastern Europe or in college or in South America. Mm-hmm. But at least from where you've played, what's the team culture like? If I were to describe swimmers, I guess, that is a difficult question.
Yeah.
But most of us are kind of outcasts, quiet to ourselves.
Yeah, swimmers are a different breed. They like to be here at 5 in the morning.
Strange, right?
Water polo players do not want to be here at 5 in the morning.
What's water polo culture like?
At least on my team, it's a camaraderie. It's people who like to be in that team environment and like to have fun. We like to say that the goalies are the weird ones, so they're the ones who are off in their own head.
They're like the breaststrokers.
Yeah. And what's interesting is, at least when it comes to international water polo, when you're on a national team, I think the biggest thing is finding camaraderie regardless of age, because our age range on our team is 17 to 33. Mm-hmm. And on a men's team, it's even a wider age gap, so you've got men who are 35, 36, and they're just water polo legends playing with the kids that are just kind of coming up and they're the future. So I think the camaraderie comes down to, and the culture comes down to, understanding each other in the water and how each person plays, and focusing on that and focusing on your identity as a water polo player, because you just have those big age ranges where you're like, I'm focusing on certain things in my life and my career, and then my teammates in high school, just worrying about what classes she's taking. So if you focus on like the external factors, you're like, wow, we're very different. But I would say culturally, that's kind of what we do, is just focus on, our team identity more than individual identity. And then that's just another layer to it.
You talked about the legends that you'd be maybe playing with or looking up to at different competitions. Who are some of your role models through your career?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I actually feel like I wasn't great at following water polo, like big time water polo players growing up. And my view and my circle was a lot smaller. And so I was really just looking up to, honestly, like my sisters and whatnot. And that was kind of just my focus, was like, being able to balance academics and athletics and play Division I water polo was everything. So I don't even know that my exposure and my view was like, oh my God, I love how this person plays. I don't know that I really did that, which is surprising. And now at this point, it's really fun for me to watch, because now that I've played against some of these people and I follow water polo on an international level a lot closer, now I would say I'm at the point where I think there's, a few players that I've seen play live and on TV, which I love the way that they play. So now I'd say, and also one of my teammates, I had the privilege of playing with Ashley Johnson. So she's the best female goalie in the world. Grew up in Miami with her, played at Princeton with her. So obviously love watching her because I got to play with her. So it's super fun to kind of see her just dominate on an international level and how much she can change the game. And then on the men's side, I think, there's a couple of like Hungarian and Serbian players, Dusan Mandic and Denis Varga, that you watch them play and it's just their movement of the ball, the way they shoot the ball is, you're like, oh, I wish I could do that. So
do you have any advice for some young water polo players who see you as a role model?
I think the advice I always give, for better or for worse, tends to be, I always have the tendency to cater my advice to girls instead of boys, and that's just because of my experience. So I'm always looking out for the girls. That's just a natural tendency, because I feel like, again, there's always like that need to prove yourself, and you have to earn those opportunities. And so I'm always just kind of telling the girls to demand respect, honestly, because in Texas, those are most of the girls that I'm exposed to that are younger players. And it's very similar to what I grew up with in Miami, where there's, pockets of good water polo. You're having to supplement with club. You're having to play with boys. You're having to go to California to get that exposure. So I've sat there when some of the girls that I used to coach in Pegasus would say like, oh, the boys won't pass us the ball, or like they'll just sit out in the scrimmage and they won't go in because they assume that, the boys don't want them to play. And I'm like, no, I need you to get in. And then I need you to not ask questions. Like, you don't ask them if you can get in. Like, your coach is the one who's in charge. So my advice is always to encourage them to push boundaries, and just kind of play as hard as they can play to earn people's respect and get those opportunities, because I think there's always that dynamic amongst kids. It gets tricky when you're playing sports in a co-ed environment. I think a lot of people probably never had that, right? In all these other sports that are just more established, where you have such a competitive level within just the, the girls group or the boys group, that you don't really play co-ed. But in water polo, it's definitely the case, and it's going to continue to be that way, I think, at least for the foreseeable future. So for me, it's always just kind of encouraging them to push boundaries and, demand respect, especially when they're playing with boys.
All right. So last big question I have for you. If you were to be in my shoes, what's the question that you would ask yourself, for a topic that you would bring up that I haven't?
Oh, that's a tough one.
And if you think we've covered everything, that's a perfectly acceptable answer too.
I think we've covered a lot of it. I think what's fun to learn about everybody, at least like athletes, is, we talked about how I got into water polo, but it's also fun to learn where you get your drive from, perhaps, and like what motivates you. And so for myself, and it's funny because I watch documentaries about, or like movies and documentaries about other athletes and whatnot. And a lot of it comes down to siblings, I think, it often does. And that was definitely the case for me. So I fell into it as like a family sport, but even outside of water polo, I think the competitiveness is a really important factor. And I think it's always interesting to learn where people get it from, because, some people have siblings, and a lot of these, like you hear Serena Williams talk about, she just wanted to be better than her sister. And for me, I even remember just wanting to like play beach volleyball with my sisters in South Beach, Miami, very, normal Miami activity. And then I was just much younger. So they'd be like, you're not good enough. Get out. Like, it was just always.
No, I'm going to prove you wrong.
It was competitive from the beginning. We just loved sports, and we had that competitive environment in our household. In a really healthy way. So it was like, hey, yeah, sure, we'll give you the opportunity to play. And then I would play, and I wouldn't play well. And then it's like, okay, you got to go, like, until you're good enough. So
you have any memories of when you finally showed up your older sisters?
Not in beach volleyball, because they were pretty good, and they had like 7 years on me at least. So I don't know that I ever caught up in that way. And then, from a water polo perspective, again, it was just like much after the fact when they weren't playing anymore. But yeah, no, it's just kind of a funny
You got them in the long game.
Yeah, got him in the long game. Yeah.
All right, that's great. Thanks for coming on, Ashley.
Yeah, thanks
for having me. Do you have any questions for me?
No. Who's your next guest?
So far, it's on schedule. Do you have any recommendations?
Oh, that's tough. I'll have to think about it. I think you might have to turn Karina around and convince her to do it.
Oh, absolutely. She's on the list. Also,
we'll
there's, Michael Yoke?
Yeah.
Yeah, so his wife competed in a few Olympics,
awesome.
Paralympic Games.
Yeah.
And I believe she even medaled.
Swimmer?
Swimming, yeah.
Okay.
So, and they also do a whole bunch of open water events. I think they've even done a triathlon.
Yeah.
So that could be a good one.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, you kicked ass.
Thank you.
Awesome job.
That was a weak hand. High five. We're going to have to do it again. Because it's my left hand.